Tonight, Fox 5 is digging into a battle between the Nevada ACLU and the Nevada Board of Pharmacy. The issue, cannabis classification. Kim Passoff joins us now to break it down.
Yeah, John, the Board of Pharmacy continues to list cannabis as a Schedule I substance, meaning it has a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. The ACLU of Nevada is pushing back, saying that is out of touch with reality and state law and should have been updated decades ago.
It's been a loophole that's been leading to criminal arrests and convictions over the course of the last 2 decades.
Attar Hasibola, executive director of the ACLU of Nevada, says he doesn't understand why the Nevada Board of Pharmacy continues to classify marijuana as a Schedule I drug.
Fentanyl is listed as a Schedule II substance. Methamphetamine and cocaine are listed as Schedule II substances because, according to the Nevada State Board of Pharmacy, cannabis appears to be of more risk than those substances.
The ACLU filed a suit on behalf of the cannabis equity inclusion community and a man named Antoine Poole.
Trying to do better in his life, seeking an occupational license to become a barber, and he's been inhibited because he too was charged under this restrictive and ridiculous scheme.
The idea that the Board of Pharmacy is fighting it, I think, is legally ridiculous. There's no basis for it.
We spoke with Matthew Hoffman, partner at Battleborn Injury Lawyers, to better understand the legal issue at hand.
In 1998, the Constitution of Nevada was amended. And in that amendment, it specifically states that marijuana does have medicinal purposes. And it lists out a variety of different medical ailments it could be used for. And so how do you say, if you're the Board of Pharmacy, that marijuana has no medicinal purpose when our own Constitution says it does?
A judge sided with the ACLU, ruling classifying marijuana as a Schedule I drug in Nevada is unconstitutional, and that another state agency, the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board, was created specifically to regulate the drug in Nevada.
Nowhere in Title 56 does it ever mention the Board of Pharmacy.
Federally, cannabis remains a Schedule I substance, but Hoffman says legally that does not matter.
The federal rule has no impact on what a state agency does. A state agency's job is to enforce state law.
The ACLU believes cannabis should have been pulled off the controlled substance list decades ago when it became legal in the state for medicinal purposes. But the Board of Pharmacy continues to resist the change.
They appealed the decision, so they're using public resources again to try to go to a higher court so they can still have some control over it. It's totally egregious. Just another example of government overreach and unchecked abuse of public resources.
And tonight I spoke with an attorney from the Nevada Board of Pharmacy. He told me that they will not comment on pending litigation.